Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode recap and thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to the A segment of episode 18 of The Loud House, April Fool's Rules. We begin this segment with Lincoln revealing to the audience that he plans to barricade himself in his room for the entirety of the next day, because the next day is April Fool's Day, Luann's favorite holiday. He then proceeds to show the audience videos of Luann's previous April Fool's Day pranks, and they are quite extreme, we'll say, to put it simply. And Lincoln's actually going to see Lana about some mahogany wood that he's going to use to barricade his door. But then Luan shows up while the other siblings are making their preparations, and she gives a rather chilling speech about how she's looking forward to April Fool's Day this year. Lincoln gets the mahogany wood, and he's still confident that everything will go smoothly. He actually calls Clyde on the walkie-talkie to see if Clyde will be interested in hanging out, assuring him that his plan will keep them safe from Luann's prank apocalypse, as he calls it. But Clyde is still hesitant, still having bad memories of the last April Fool's Day. Apparently, Luann's prank apocalypse extends to anyone who sets foot on the Loud family's property during April Fool's Day. But then Lincoln receives a text from Ronnie Anne Santiago, and it turns out she's planning to stop by tomorrow to give Lincoln a present. Lincoln, though, is fearful that Ronnie Anne will get hit with Luann's pranks during the prank apocalypse, and he apparently doesn't think that rescheduling is an option, and he seems to be paranoid that Ronnie Anne would take her frustrations out on him or blame him for Luann's pranking. So Clyde actually suggests that he try to appeal to Luann's humanity in the hopes of calling the prank apocalypse off. But that doesn't work. Luann's even sitting in a April Fool's Day themed chair while petting Cliff the cat like a James Bond villain while this happens. And when Lincoln goes to talk to Clyde again, he admits he's a bit distracted because it turns out the McBride family has a pet cat. Her name is Cleopatra. and Clyde said that she's been irritable lately, so they put her in a timeout crate. And this gives Lincoln an idea. He calls for a meeting in the basement with the rest of his sisters besides Luann. Lola even turns on the washing machine, thinking that it will drown out the noise so that Luann won't overhear them. Lola apparently got the idea from a mob movie. But anyway, Lincoln mentions his plan to them, and they set it into motion. While Luann's asleep, they jump her and they trap her in a cage to make sure that... And they plan to not let her out until it's April 2nd. And Luann's not happy about this. Once April Fool's Day rolls around, though, Luna, the sister who shares a room with Luann, is horrified. She gives a horrified scream that gets the rest of the siblings in, and they find out that Luann somehow escaped in the middle of the night. Lisa decides to take shelter in her bunker out in the backyard, while the rest of the sisters take up Lincoln on his offer to hide in his room. And Lincoln's already been hit with a couple of the pranks, but he says at least it means Ronnie Anne won't get hurt by them. And that's when Lincoln actually decides he'll endure all the pranks in the house and de-prank the house, if you will, if it means that Ronnie Anne will be safe. The rest of his sisters wish him luck on this as they barricade themselves in his room, and Lincoln proceeds to go through unpranking the house, or de-pranking the house, however it's said. Anyway, one thing Lincoln doesn't fall for is a kitchen this way sign, which points out the door, out the front door. But as Lincoln's taking care of de-pranking the house, Lana reveals she doesn't know what rationing means, as she already went through all the food. And they plan to draw straws to see who goes into the kitchen, but Lenny mistakes it as literally drawing straws, so she volunteers to go out. And Lola stops Lucy from clarifying what draw straws really means in that context. But Lenny is the one who ends up falling for the kitchen this way sign, and there's a couple of them out on the street. So Lenny wanders off into the main town of Royal Woods while thanking the sign as she's on her merry way. And as the de-pranking continues, Lincoln eventually hears from Clyde over the walkie-talkie. Apparently, Lucy contacted Clyde regarding funeral arrangements for Lincoln. Lincoln explains what he's been doing this whole time, and Clyde even when Clyde finds out that Lincoln hasn't gone into Lori and Lenny's room yet, Clyde actually volunteers to take the bullet for that one, and he considers it to be worth it. And while I'm thinking about it, Lynn Sr. and Rita actually take refuge in Lisa's bunker, although Lisa makes them sign documents to say that they won't hold her responsible for explosions in or around the house. But anyway, after all the pranks have been done and Lincoln and Clyde have endured them, Ronnie Anne finally arrives. And that's where Luan says that she beat Lincoln, only for Lincoln to say that Luan didn't truly win because he only set off the pranks on the behalf of Ronnie Anne so that she wouldn't get hit in the crossfire. And Ronnie Anne has an appreciative smile on her face as she hears this. Luan, though, says that the reason Ronnie Anne came over was her idea, Luan's idea. She said she called Ronnie Anne saying that Lincoln loves April Fools so much to lure Lincoln out of his safe haven so that he could get hit with all the pranks. And apparently she wants Ronnie Anne to pie Lincoln in the face. Ronnie Anne has the pie in hand, but she pies Luan, not Lincoln. Lincoln is surprised by this, and Ronnie Anne says it's the least she could do since she was grateful to Lincoln for taking all of those pranks on her behalf. Ronnie Anne then offers to help draw eyebrows on Lincoln. He apparently lost them during the prank apocalypse. And to go get milkshakes together. So the two 11-year-olds set off to do that. And Luan actually doesn't seem to mind that she was the one who got hit with the pie, simply saying to herself how Ronnie Anne is a keeper. Afterwards, the Loud parents and the rest of the sisters, besides Luan and Lenny, all regather after they think everything's over, and they piece together that Lenny's off somewhere in town because of the kitchen this way sign. So they all get into Vanzilla. The segment ends with blue paint covering the inside of Vanzilla with the Loud family members that went in getting hit by it, and Luan being the one who talks to the audience to do one last pun before ending the segment. Now, based on what I've seen throughout the internet, April Fool's Rules is apparently not too well liked among the fandom, to say the least, or not many viewers really liked the segment a lot. But if you were to ask me personally, I actually don't dislike this segment. And the reason is, I feel this is another good example of how to execute something well. And that's what I feel here. Like, I can see why some people would think Luann's sadistic side on April Fool's Day is unsettling, and why they think, why she reminds them of the Joker, let's say. But for me, the way it was executed and the way the pranks all happened, it felt to me like something out of Tom and Jerry or Looney Tunes, or actually it'd probably be more appropriate to say it's like Screwy Squirrel. He was another old cartoon character, and that's what I felt. Like, it felt so over the top and wacky enough that I didn't really, it didn't really bother me so much. Like, obviously these aren't pranks you would do in real life, but I think the fact that they felt so wacky and unrealistic is why it didn't really bother me. It felt like it was one of those cases where they did it well, so it didn't come off as too dangerously mean-spirited to me. It just felt more like yeah, this was just some wacky, zany tooniness or cartoony nature. So that's probably why I was okay with it. Though I can understand why some people might not agree with that. But again, I guess it kind of depends how you look at how the pranks came out. So I actually didn't mind it so much, is what I'm getting at. I know a lot of people didn't like Luan after this segment, but again, it didn't really bother me too much because of, like I mentioned before, it just felt very over the top and cartoony to me that I didn't really mind it so much. And oh, this part is actually interesting. This is the first time we hear one of the parents say what seems to be the full name of a Loud sibling. In this case, they said Lisa Marie Loud, and that made people wonder, wait, don't the Loud siblings have middle names that start with L too? And part of the confusion actually happened in I believe it was on Instagram. Nickelodeon had a video where they animated Lincoln answering questions from viewers, and one of these questions was what Lincoln's middle name was, and he actually says that during this, like, the Loud parents would shout Marie as if it were the middle name, and this seems to have led to confusion as well, because some people seem to think that Marie actually is all 11 Loud siblings' middle name, but I actually went and rewatched that interview again, or that Q&A part, just to make sure I heard right, and from what it sounded like to me, it didn't sound like Lincoln was saying it is their middle names. It's just that the Loud parents shouted as if it were their middle names. And I think what also supports this is back in Driving Miss Hazy, Lori's driver's license and Lenny's hypothetical driver's license both showed their middle name as starting with an L. So that's my interpretation of it. I don't believe Marie is actually their middle names. I think for whatever reason, the Loud parents just shout Marie rather than actually shouting their real middle names when they do the full name ultimatum. So I guess that might just be a big mystery, is what are the Loud siblings' real middle names? That might be something we may never find the answer out to. But besides that, this marks the next appearance of Ronnie Anne, her first one after the events of Save the Date, where she and Lincoln started to form a better bond with each other after they've come to get to know each other better. Now, some people thought Lincoln's fear that Ronnie Anne might take out being pranked out on him, or that Lincoln's fear that she wouldn't like rescheduling. Some people had used that as justification to continue to vilify Ronnie Anne or act like that she's not such a good person, really. But to me, that's not how it came out to me. I was under the impression that at this point in time, while Lincoln is still friendly with Ronnie Anne, while he has come to have a better relationship with Ronnie Anne compared to before, I think that was more his paranoia talking, or Lincoln was just being paranoid because he was still, even if it wasn't intentional on his part, I think he still might have been thinking about his past interactions with Ronnie Anne before they started to get more friendly with each other. And the reason why I think that is more so because what the ending of the segment, I think, is what helps to reaffirm that, because while Lincoln feared that Ronnie Anne was going to prank him, she actually instead hit Luan with the pie and showed honest appreciation for the fact that Lincoln was willing to take the bullet for her, so to speak. So I think this was just meant to help a step-by-step procedure to show Lincoln that Ronnie Anne really isn't as bad as he first thought she was, and meant to show how I think this and Ronnie Anne's future appearances, at least until her first season 2 appearance, I think it was still meant to be a lesson about why you shouldn't hold a first impression against someone. We'll go more into details about that once we get to her first season 2 appearance, because I think that's the point where it finally reaches its, I guess you could call it, climax. But That's what I feel. I think that it was more Lincoln's paranoia talking, and that this was just meant to show us that Ronnie Anne has been on the ball or been making an honest effort to make sure she doesn't backpedal on learning her lesson from Save the Date. So I liked it. So overall, yeah, this reminded me of Screwy Squirrel, and we got to see a little more insight about Luan and the darker nature of her pranking, and some people had different opinions about that. And like I said, it was nice, even if it was only brief, it was nice to see more of Ronnie Anne and Lincoln forming a stronger bond with each other after they've mended fences since the end of Save the Date. As to be expected, we'll be covering the B segment next. Take care, and until next time.